So the other day, I was just scrolling through Steam looking for something to play. And then, to my surprise, on the store page, I see the Steam Deck. It was just readily available for me to purchase. Oh my god, it's actually available. What? I was kind of shocked, but to be honest, I was more shocked when Gabe Newell's greasy hands reached right out of my computer screen, into my back pocket, stole my wallet, entered my credit card information, and purchased one. The next week, it just showed up to my door, and not to say that I'm a little disappointed, but I also appreciate it. At least that's the story that I told my fiance. So babe, if you're watching this, I totally did not spend $744 on a Steam Deck. Let's go! Anyways, it's here, and today I'm going to talk to you about whether or not the Steam Deck is worth it, just from a first impression standpoint. Before we get started though, these videos are super expensive to keep up with, so a like and a sub to the channel would be greatly appreciated, and please consider hitting that notification bell to get notified every time I upload, because it really does help out a ton. I want to attack the Steam Deck as if it's a console, whether the experience is just as simple as turning on your Xbox or laying in bed with your Nintendo Switch. And the reason for doing this is because I feel like Valve's only real competitor in this space is Nintendo. And the Switch is a console targeted mainly toward children. But I won't judge. I've bought like 5 of them throughout the year. It's a great console. But I think it's a pretty fair comparison since they're both trying to accomplish the same thing. With the way the Steam Deck is priced, it's super compelling for someone who wants to get into PC gaming but maybe doesn't have the space for a computer or really the knowledge to go out and buy one or build one. So starting off, the Steam Deck came inside of an official and high quality Steam Deck carrying case, and alongside it was a 45 watt Type-C power adapter. Kind of a shame it's permanently attached to the brick, but whatever. Aside from that, you're pretty much greeted with the Steam Deck. It's dead on arrival, so you're going to want to plug it in before you turn it on. The setup process was pretty simple though. Basically, you turn it on, log in, or create a Steam account, and you're pretty much up and running after an update. Once that's out of the way though, you're greeted with this homepage. It automatically assorts the games into various categories like Great on Deck, all games, installed, and any of the collections that you've made on Steam. That Great on Deck category is something that I would pay attention to, especially if you are new to PC gaming, because it's going to easily tell you whether or not these games are a good experience. All of these titles that have that verified rating were looked at by Valve and have been backed by the community to ensure that these games are going to be just basically plug and play. Verified means it runs perfectly with very little setup. Playable means it runs well with minor tweaking, or there's something gimmicky like a third-party game launcher. And then there's unsupported. Now, where things get a little bit confusing for the Steam Deck is unsupported doesn't always mean that it doesn't work. Unsupported could mean that the game just doesn't have a rating yet, or there's actually some compatibility issues with things like anti-cheat. Because the Steam Deck is running a modified version of Arch Linux, it's going to make a lot of anti-cheat in certain multiplayer games incompatible right out of the gate, because those require things like Windows 10 or Windows 11 to function. This makes a lot of sense from a technical standpoint, but if you're expecting to play games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Overwatch, or Valorant, I'm sorry, but this is not going to be as plug and play as you may have hoped for. Those games will require you to install Windows, or there's heavy workarounds that involve you tweaking some files within Linux itself. If you buy the Steam Deck knowing that you're going to only play the verified or playable titles that are available to you, you're going to have a pretty good experience, except for when it isn't. I've been playing a game called Shatterline, and Shatterline is a playable title on the Steam Deck. However, it's an online-only game, and it wouldn't connect to servers and kept throwing out anti-cheat errors. What I had to do was open the Linux environment, download an updated version of Proton, and change the compatibility mode in the game. After doing that, the experience was amazing, but if stuff like this scares you or you think that it's daunting, don't worry, because there's a ton of YouTubers and people in the Steam Deck community that are there to make this experience the best that it can be. And with consistent updates from Valve and to Proton, I'm sure these issues will just get resolved as time goes on. But before we talk gameplay though, I just wanted to talk about the hardware. The Steam Deck has a ton of different ways to interact with it since there's a ton of different games that it needs to be compatible with. Most glaringly are these two trackpads. The left one for the most part acts like a D-pad and the right one is basically a trackpad. They can both be configured to do various things though, and the haptic feedback in them is really nice, especially when scrolling or using it as a pointer in the Linux environment. And the rest of the controller on the other hand is quite standard. There's ABXY face buttons, a D-pad, start and select, and 4 triggers. The D-pad feels pretty okay. It's nothing like the PS Vita, which was probably my favorite, and the ABXY buttons are quite good. The analogs feel responsive and the triggers are nicely spaced and have a good throw. My favorite part about the controller though is these 4 back paddles. They're super clicky, easily remappable in SteamOS with per game controller configurations, and while they're easy to press, they're going to be extremely hard to accidentally press, which I can appreciate. The Steam button is a quick access menu for storefront, friends, and downloads, and the settings button on the right is a quick toggle for things like brightness and the performance settings. You're able to, on a per game basis, change the frame rate limit, the refresh rate, performance overlay to view frame timings, and FPS counter, as well as limit the power consumption and even change the GPU clock. This is the kind of stuff that I love and is really nice to see on this handheld, but it can be really daunting, especially if you're a newcomer, maybe even coming from the Nintendo Switch. The display is also pretty nice, though the aspect ratio is quite weird. Because it's a 16 by 10 1280 by 800 display, there are some games that actually don't allow for a 16 by 10 resolution, which is just kind of odd. Personally, I actually think this resolution would have made way more sense if Valve went for an OLED, since when you have an OLED display, those black bars at the top and bottom would be completely turned off. This is something that also would have helped get more battery life out of the unit, which is right now one of the weakest links with the Steam Deck. I'd be lying if I said that I was able to play more than a couple of hours on battery with games like Shadowline or Apex Legends. The battery when playing more intense AAA games is honestly quite terrible, and while I don't think it's necessarily that bad given the performance you're getting out of the unit, I just think it's a little misleading with the 2 to 8 hour battery life that Valve claims, because I would not expect anything above that 2 hour range unless you're playing some indie titles like Terraria or Stardew Valley. That being said, I think the ability to downclock the GPU, reduce your overall TDP, and even change and limit the frame rates within SteamOS itself on a per game basis is something that's nice to have, because you could actually extend your battery life a lot more while doing those things. The actual gaming experience is something I've been really enjoying. I kind of went ballistic the other day downloading as much as I could to try it out, but I've pretty much come to one conclusion. Anything will run. Whether you're playing at 60 FPS or limiting it to 40 or 30, it's a great gaming experience. I prefer playing on the Steam Deck over the Switch because it's way more comfortable. In my opinion, although it's much bigger, you actually have something to grip on that resembles a controller, and the button placement makes way more sense. If you do plan on playing for an extended period of time though, I'll link a case in the description, and the only reason I say that is because the console can get quite warm, which causes my hands to get pretty sweaty, and it just makes the console feel slippery and oily. If you're not someone that struggles with that kind of thing, it's not going to be a big deal, but a case for the Steam Deck, in my opinion, is a huge recommend. The model that I went with was the mid-tier option, and it's the one that I'd be most likely to recommend. I think the 512 gig model would be nice when it comes to peace of mind, but at the same time, I don't think it's worth it for getting that etched glass. The highest tier Steam Deck does come with an etched glass, and while I think it's nice because it reduces reflections, I also think that it's not very nice because it makes the colors look more washed out and muted. Not only that, but if you plan on putting a screen protector on your device or you're just very accident prone, that coating appears to come off and scratch pretty easily. I just don't really see the point to buying the etched version unless you just play it in the glaring sun all the time. With mine, I'm using a 400 gigabyte SanDisk SD card. Games boot just as fast on it, but if you're playing games with a ton of shader caching like Cyberpunk, I would recommend playing those kinds of games on the internal SSD since it's faster and it won't cause any hitches in performance. But for lighter titles, the SD card is just fine, and I've played a majority of the games on it without any problems at all. I'll also put a couple of recommended SD cards in the description if you're curious, because I feel like it makes the experience with the Steam Deck much better since you have more access to your entire library. They are also hot swappable, so you can keep your games on one SD card, maybe Windows on another, and another set of library on the other SD card. So you can kind of just like stack them up as you please. I would also recommend going the SD card route at the moment, because the 2230 SSDs that are actually used as the internal storage for the Steam Deck just aren't really widely available right now and are pretty expensive. So if you're looking to get 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes, literally as of right now, the cheapest route is just to get an SD card. And I think for the most part, you'll be fine, especially if you get a fast one. So let's circle back to the beginning for a second. Is the Steam Deck for everyone? No, absolutely not. And I'm not saying this to gatekeep or anything. If you want to buy one, go buy one. Most likely you'll have a good experience with it. But I don't think the Steam Deck is a pick up and play console for the vast majority of people. Given the Steam Deck is meant to be a personal handheld and not quite a family console, means it's expensive to justify. Not quite consumer friendly unless you know your stuff or have the patience, and it's not entirely practical as a portable device since you can't really take it anywhere without the power brick. That being said, I've really enjoyed playing with my deck. That sounds weird. I've been a PC gamer for years, and across multiple accounts, I own hundreds and hundreds of games. Not only that, but I also family share with my cousin, who also has hundreds of games. And when it comes to PC games in general, they're very readily available for you to buy, pretty much on sale all the time. So to have a handheld where the only real barrier to entry is a little bit of knowledge and that upfront price, I think it's the same argument as a PC. You pay a lot, but in the long term, you're spending much less. And you also don't have to pay for any recurring subscriptions like you would on an Xbox or a PlayStation, which is something that I had a hard time doing with on the Nintendo Switch. I don't know about you, but $60 for Switch games, it's kind of absurd. There's only a couple of titles on the Switch that I would say is actually worth that price point. But other than that, it's just mostly shovelware. Thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video. I'm going to make another video as, my time goes on with this thing. And if you did enjoy it, I would really appreciate you leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and even consider hitting that post notification bell. I'll see you all in the next one. Hope you all had a good day, and peace out.